growing pains as a country. And Australia as a current concept is only 230 years old, whereas Aboriginal culture, First Nations people have been here since the beginning of time and have a documented history of 80,000 years plus. So when you compare the two, it's like having your 1000th generation grandparent come back to sit with you with a preteen in that concept. So I think it's a perfect platform. As a parent, as a woman who's in business, as a woman trying to navigate so many different roles and places, I think there's certain aspects where I feel like an adult, and then there's certain other things where I feel like I'm still open to learning and making mistakes and still figuring it out. Sometimes I go, oh yeah, I'm a 38, I'm almost 40. Like, what the heck? Why am I still thinking like that and needing like I need to seek permission?
Oh, it's so true. I'm 38 as well, and I very much understand what you mean, and a mother as well. Lillian, what about you? Do you consider yourself to be a grown-up adult?
No.
Just flat out.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking, what is a grown-up adult? Like, who makes those rules? Who defines this? For me, in this season, I feel that I have everything that I have to make responsible choices as a businesswoman, as a sister, as a friend, as a colleague. So with regards to, from a societal point of view, being able to manage responsibilities, yes, I would say I'm a grown adult, but what is a grown adult?
What is that?
What is it? So I consider myself as somebody that is constantly evolving. And because of that, that means I'm growing all the time. I'm growing up all the time, showing up every season, every situation, every context. So I can't say I'm grown. I am growing. That's why I say no, because I'm not a grown adult. No, I've got a lot.
An evolution. I like it. All right, Gemma, where do you sit are you just in the middle, or where are you?
I think I'm a fully grown adult in what society wants me to be, but I'm trying not to be an adult actually, because I think that I think I grew up so quickly and so fast. I was the oldest sibling and had a lot of responsibility and had to do a lot of growing fast. And I think that what I'm trying to learn to do now is to let go of that and to just be playful and to be in the moment and to experience joy and curiosity and some of the things that I think I would have fast-tracked when I was younger in an attempt to grow up quickly. And I'm realizing there's so much joy in just being and playing and experiencing things from a curious angle. And, this adulting of knowing stuff. It's better to be a learner than a knower. So I'm trying to shake off the grown-up stuff and be more playful, actually. But I think in terms of societal boxes, I probably tick most things in a sensible way. But sensible isn't really serving me anymore. So I'm starting to shake off the politeness and the grown-up.
Oh, you've all touched on so many factors that we believe to be, being an adult. But I will continue with my rapid fire questions. It's really hard to do rapid fire with 3 answers, by the way, but we'll get there. Chantel, what can you tell us and choose to share with us as your most embarrassing adult fail? See, the other two are like looking at me like, oh, I've got time to think about this. That's why it's not rapid fire. It's rapid fire because I'll have to switch it around because it's not fair. Like you get put on the spot. Everyone else is like, I can see their thinking faces, but tell us the adult fail.
I don't know. I can't think of anything that's like embarrassing as such, but I think, trying to have an online presence and have, I guess, some sort of level of influence and a brand, and then having a very big family. So I'm the third eldest of 18, and I'm like Gemma, I had to grow up really quickly, and I really love what Gemma said about both Lillian and Gemma about just being more playful and kind of just letting things go and following the seasons. But whenever I think about if I got onto a really big platform, what that would mean around my family and my siblings, because some of my siblings can be really embarrassing, and they sit there actually like things, they'll bring up things like, oh, my sister's a 3-time world champion, but one time we're at our auntie's house and we were wrestling and she got taken down by her younger brother and knocked a hole in the wall. Didn't choose to admit that it was her, and then her younger siblings got in trouble for it for about 5 years until it was found out later that it was actually the wrestler in the family and the older brother that were actually the ones putting holes in walls. So it'd be those sort of things, not taking responsibility when you should.
Oh, so it would be things from your childhood or younger life that would come to haunt you and embarrass you as an adult.
Pretty much, yeah. And having the siblings do the pleasure for you because they're like, oh, you think you're a big shot? We're going to bring you down a peg or two.
Oh, I love that. What about you, Lillian? Can you think of an adult fail or an embarrassing adult moment?
I've got a number of adult fails. I guess what comes to mind being in the digital age is, being part of so many groups. So if you think about WhatsApp, we've got a WhatsApp group for everything. WhatsApp group for shopping, WhatsApp group for the family, WhatsApp group for life. And sometimes you get the WhatsApp groups or the groups on platforms confused and you send the wrong message to the wrong platform. And I've happened to do that. So I've happened to do that a few times, and that would be the most embarrassing. So what I've come to learn is just be a little bit more careful. Be aware of the group's name. Don't send messages at particular times. Just be conscious about the content. So I would say that would be the most embarrassing thing that comes to mind as an adult.
Everyone has had that moment, be it even in a text to one person, let alone to a whole WhatsApp group. So yeah, that's a good one. What about you, Gemma?
Oh, well, what I've realized as an adult is that embarrassment is actually healthy because it's fleeting. It comes and it goes. And I think when you start to take on the idea of shame, that becomes a whole different story. So I think you can actually appreciate embarrassment in a different way because it is fleeting. When you're older, it comes and goes. Whereas I think when I was younger, I definitely would have let that embarrassment turn into shame quite quickly. But, just as one example, when I was in the corporate world, they did this, team event for the corporate, games, this, sporting event. I am the least sporting person. I really enjoy a dance to Lizzo and Baker Boy, in my kitchen with my kids, but I am not really an athlete. And they encouraged me to get involved. And I said, why not? I'll give anything a go. And so I did the corporate triathlon, which was a swim through Sydney Harbour. And I couldn't really swim. So I did it as backstroke. And, and the category after me,
backstroke.
I tried to do it by backstroke because it was the only thing I was comfortable with. And then the group after me had to start while I was still in the water because I was slow. And then they even overtook me. And then I went to do the cycle and my friend was just laughing at me and I was thinking, that's really rude, Zoe. Why are you laughing at me?
Not very helpful.
She said, Gemma, you've got your bike helmet on back to front. So it was just a series of embarrassments and I crossed the line after the run. I wanted to throw up, but the most memorable moment was I had just such a beautiful brunch after overlooking the harbour. So everything is fleeting and everything's about perspective.
That is so true. Oh, but in those moments, you're like, oh, everyone's looking at me.
And are the sharks going to get me? More importantly.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. That's a different podcast. So Chantel, who is a more grown-up adult or more adult-to adult that you rely on?
I think it depends on the season and the situation, but for me, my 14-year-old daughter is one of those people because when you're raising a child and you're trying to break intergenerational lines of trauma, you're trying to handle your own bullshit so that your children don't become victims of your trauma and your circumstances, that to me is where the hard work is. And sometimes she'll come out with real levels of maturity and she'll challenge me and she'll call me out on my hypocrisy or she'll challenge me. And I've always said to my kids, particularly the oldest one, as I parent her at 14, I'm celebrating 14 years of being a parent.
Yeah.
So for her, and to give her the space to acknowledge when she's right as well is really important for me, because she's actually really wise and she's been through her own stuff and she brings her own experiences to the table. Like, particularly when I'm doing podcasts or she'll come and help me at events and she's like, Mum, you were going off on a tangent here, and people loved it. Like, people give me the great feedback.
Yeah.
And she goes, Mum, it's important for me to give you the real feedback, because then you're going to keep growing. And so that's one thing. And I think learning from my children is a really important aspect of acknowledging where I'm at in the seasons and where they're at. But also my grandmother and my ancestors, I look a lot to my spirituality and connecting to my ancestors and trusting the wisdom that comes to me. But my grandmother was always one as well, because she married my grandfather straight out of a convalescent home. He was a prisoner of war. And she was at a time where she was not only raising a family, she was helping manage a family business, but she also went off and got another side job as well as a cleaner at a school and worked in those hours just so she would have her own money separate to that of her husband and not being reliant on her husband and my oldest uncle, because at that time, like, all the money obviously was going towards wherever the husband wanted it to go. So it's very much about holding those different spaces, but it's nice to always have someone who's more responsible or knowledgeable than yourself in situations.
I love that. I love that you can pull from both, but from both directions as such. Amazing. Lillian, who's the more adult in your life? Who do you turn to?
Definitely my mother. She is a massive inspiration to me. I have seen a human being become better every time, every season. She has just shown up from day one. She was born in a slum in Kenya, and that's where I'm from originally. She didn't have a lot of education. She found a way to get qualifications in, I think it was a secretarial course that they used to do in Kenya at that time. She got her papers, secured a job in the government department, and made her way through the minister's office, just built a career for herself, went into the corporate world, built a HR career for herself, and was very successful, and got outside of that space, the corporate world, and her own business, and was able to get a master's. I think she was the first one in her family to get a master's at the age of 50, and opened her own psych practice. And she has been practicing for over 15 years.
Wow.
And yes, and a couple of years ago, she was like, you know what, Lillian? I feel like life has just begun for me. I have a PhD. And I'm like, wow, Mom, of course. You can do a PhD. We have your back. And she decided not to take that route. She's finishing up doing theology studies. And the last couple of years, actually last year, she became a pastor. So she's been pastoring this church virtually, thanks to COVID. And amazing. So she's the adult in my life that I look up to, because she's challenged gender norms in a patriarchal society. I've seen a woman who is very influential. I've seen a woman that is inspirational. I've seen a woman that is very authentic and just shows up and is ready to tackle life and give her absolute best. I've seen a woman who is a role model without even trying, and she's been very impactful, not only to us as, children. So I've got 3 younger siblings. She's been very impactful to other people in the community. So she's an adult that I consider in my life.
Sounds like a real grown-up adult.
Yeah.
She really sounds like she knows what she's doing. But the fact that she's still learning is amazing. So
yes, absolutely.
Gemma, who's the adult you turn to?
Definitely my wife, because I am the kind of creative.
I love that so much.
I have to turn to my wife because I am kind of a bit of a free, bit of a free bird and just, very happy to go with the flow. And, that means that I never know when bills need to be paid and kind of forget some of those really fundamental life things. So, I'm really happy that, I've got someone who has strengths and wants to do that kind of house admin. And then the stuff that I get to do is planning we've got a caravan and we go off on different caravan trips. So I get to do all the planning around our adventures, and then my wife kind of is the very sensible, pragmatic one. So I think we can get to play to strengths. But I think to Chantel's point, about, your daughter, Chantel, and I've got a almost 7-year-old, and I think there's also so much to learn from younger people as well, because they just have this ability to hold a mirror up to us, about what's important, and help us reflect on whether we're in our values or not, and just get us to sort of, I guess, reflect and check in with ourselves when life's going so quickly around us. So I would say it's also checking in with him, and then that adult pragmatic life stuff with my wife. So yeah, I think it's good to have people that can hold you and that, you can play to strengths around you, and whether that's your family or community, and whatever that looks like. You don't have to be it all. You can have your own strengths and, come together with others and get it done together.
Yeah, so true. I'm a parent myself, so I very much understand where you're coming from. It's the mirroring. They mirror the things they can see in us, and they tell it how it is. There's not much of a filter there. So my last question for what is not very rapid but fire, it's a bit of a quirky one. Chantel, if someone was to play you in a movie of you and your life, who would you choose as an actress, to play you today, the age you are today, and then to play you at in your 60s? See, they're both looking at me now going, oh, I can think about this. Poor Chantel, I've put her on the spot again. You are the only one technically doing rapid fire.
I'm not really good with remembering people's names.
You can just tell me, that woman or that person or the guy.
Angelina Jolie comes to mind. Angelina Jolie comes to mind now, I think, because of her, or Sandra Bullock, those two are the ones that come to mind for playing now.
Yeah.
I think as an older female, she's the older lady that's, she sometimes does the action movie. She's out of that Red, and she's in
Helen Mirren.
Helen Mirren, that's the one. I think Helen Mirren would be the one that I would pick to play me as an older female, because as I'm getting older, and I feel like I'm shedding a lot of stuff that just doesn't need to be there, because I tend to seek out older women, one, because of attachment disorder in terms of not having had my mum around when I was younger and stuff like that, but also wanting to learn from others and looking for women who are 10 to 15 years in front of me going, what were you doing at my age? So then I get a realistic perspective of people going, I'm trying to be them now, when at the same age they were having similar struggles. Yeah. What would they do differently, and what was their greatest success, sort of thing, so that I can try and learn from their mistakes now and make different ones. So and
they're going to be yours.
Yeah, and I think I'm learning to just not care as much about things and be, but also at the same time learning to be more subtle and strategic, which is not a key strength of mine. As a younger age, I feel like I'm becoming more refined and elegant, but I've still got that ability to just drive the point straight down when I need to.
Helen Mirren would be able to do that. She's very good. Lillian, tell us who. You today and you in your 60s.
I've just had a mind.
Your brain's gone blank.
I've literally
yes, I got a rapid fire question that's supposed to be a rapid fire question.
Yeah, let me think about that. Gemma, are you ready to answer this question?
Gemma's ready. All right.
Yep, I'll handball you.
Thanks, Lillian. I've gone to kind of very typical queer icon world here. So I think I would have Sarah Paulson of the, Ratched and American Horror Story play me now. I think that she just captures quirkiness and intensity and lightness in a way that I'm just not very one note. So I would choose her. And I reckon as I'm older, like maybe Lily Tomlin. Again, just like quirky, or like even Jane Fonda. Like, but yeah. Even kind of Jane Fonda, maybe. Yep. But yeah, Lily Tomlin, I think. If you haven't seen Frankie and Grace on Netflix, definitely watch that.
Oh, okay. Now I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
yep. So, yeah, I totally get that.
That would be me as I'm in my 60s for sure. Just need the quirkiness.
I think Lillian's got it.
I would choose Lupita Nyong'o.
Such a good choice.
I align with, obviously, her being Kenyan. There's no bias there, but the fact that she really embraces her cultural heritage and has stepped on the international stage and showcased that without compromising who she is, where she comes from. I love her grace. I love her family values. I love her humility. So there are things that I connect with when I Lupita. In the future, probably somebody like Angela Bassett. She's just gracious, and she's been able to have a very successful and long career, and she seems to understand the concept of, being a woman of color and showing up and doing that consistently and offering value and role modeling. So for me, I look at her as someone that could play me in the future, somebody that I aspire to be.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing all of your answers to some obvious questions, because we're talking about growing pains and becoming adults, but I had to throw in a bit of a quirky one at the end just to kind of see if I could scratch past the surface of what I can see in, across this tiny screen as I'm sharing a little bit about you with our audience and our listeners. So growing pains, we all have them. We're still having them. I'm not done yet. I think I'll still have them till my last breath. But one of the things that we're going to dive into today is this thing called conversations. We're having one now. I always say to my guests of any of the podcasts I do before we start recording that I don't censor anyone. So that to me is a big part of conversations. It's having a flow, having a safe space to share whatever comes to mind, being respectful of what you share in that space. Now, any of you are welcome to jump in and answer this, maybe not all at once, because that could be an audible nightmare for our producer who's going to have to put all this together. But, you've all come from different backgrounds, and you're now forming this alliance with the focus of making change for the better for all of us to be better together. So when you think of your experiences as a young adult, what do you believe was the moment that really shaped you into who you are today? There may not actually just be one, but there may be one that comes to mind.
Such an interesting question, and it's one that we often use in our program, actually, Caroline, because part of the work we do is to try and help people understand their own stories, because we rarely pause to understand who we are before we can be in community with others. And so one of the questions we often ask is, what are some of the moments that really shaped you? I don't think I have really one big moment, but for me it was a series of moments. So I think that idea of having quite a lot of responsibility quite young, being the oldest child. My mum was 17 when she had me. And so I felt like even in our household, there was just more that sense of pulling together, and jobs that had to be done as a family. And my mum was a single parent for most of our lives growing up with 3 kids. And so I think that just the sense of responsibility that comes quite young was a moment that shaped me. I used to babysit before it was like you were really even allowed to babysit probably, without any other adult supervisors there. Yeah, I know how to change a nappy and feed a child when I was 8 years old. Like it's just part of what happened. So I think that they're some of the moments that shaped me in a sense of responsibility and the care and generosity that I offer to others. And I think the other that I talk about in our program when I share my story, the two others are really my relationship with my granddad, who didn't really have a lot of money, came from a very, very poor background, but had a huge amount of love and humor and was always telling jokes, creating fun environments. He had a drawer in his house with fake noses and balloons he used to blow up and, these weird ventriloquist dolls that he used to bring out and do little shows with. And so that aspect of fun, I always reflect on that, in terms of how can I create humor and fun. And I think the final one is really just navigating my sexuality, to be honest, and spending a lot of time trying to conform to society's norms of exploring relationships with men, and then realizing that actually when I was most alive and free was when I was in a relationship with a woman, and navigating that for me was something that really shaped who I am today.
Yeah. Amazing. Chantel?
I think it's the same as Gem. It's like it's different seasons, but I think very early on realizing that there were other people who needed my protection. So from a really young age, being able to step up, and I'm known as the Barkindji warrior in my community, and always having the ability to stand up and fight for others, but also this courage to speak what was in my heart and being able to follow that calling in my heart. So I've never really had a roadmap to get me to where I am today, but I've always had this ability to follow that calling, and it's more like a compass as opposed to having a roadmap, because I'm too many bloody firsts in my family, and it's not something that I'm proud of. It's something I'm proud of to break those cycles, but it's something I wish wasn't the case, to be the first to finish school, the first to get a university degree and stuff like that. So I think for me, that ability to step up, and I had to realize from a really young age that I had to help myself before I could help others. And in order to be a guide or a light for others, I first had to, there were so many people who would say something and then contradict themselves. Like adults who would say, oh, you've got to learn to work hard. And then you would actually sit back and watch them and go, well, you're not role modeling that. So from a really young age, for me, it was about being what I spoke about. It was making sure that there was that credibility there and the truth that I was living the processes of the messages that I was sharing or wanting to give to others, and that I had to help myself before I could help others, because as an Aboriginal woman, as a mother, we're all about the collective. We're all about looking after others first, but we're a part of the collective. And I lost my mum at 42. In our communities, we're losing our elders at 50 and 60 before they even have a chance to become elders or to pass that knowledge on to the next generation. And it's because they're serving everyone else, and there's so much going on, and there's so much dysfunction that we're burning out earlier and earlier. So for me, it's having the courage to go, I matter in that cycle as well. And I can serve from a cup empty. I know what it is. I can do it all the time, but it's not sustainable. And how much more powerful am I to my family, to my community, when my cup is half full or it's sustained and the roots that support me are strong. But also, as Jim said, knowing your story and being able to handle and hold your own bullshit as well as your own potential, I think is so important in being able to show up and do the work to create change in the world, because we're bringing more and more humanity. There's a calling to bring humanity back to the workforce, back to the world, because what we're doing is not sustainable.
So true. And it sounds as though the moments in time and the lessons and what you've seen happen, they are the tipping points, but they're also the ongoing lessons, because they're the constant reminders along the way throughout the journey that continue to shape you all of us, because even, what Gemma has shared as well is of that similar nature, that it's an ongoing shaping. It's not and then this happened, and then I was the thing, and then I stayed that thing forever. Lillian, I've actually heard you speak on stage, and so there are a few things I know about your story, but is there something specific that comes to mind for you?
What's shaped me, there are many things that have shaped me, like, what Gemma and Chantel have mentioned, but as a young adult, what played a big part, one of the things that played a big part is just the upbringing within the tribal context. My upbringing in Kenya, and within that tribal context, and also having philosophies that I followed. And that, for me, has had the biggest impact as a young adult for me. Being part of a tribe is incredibly special. Right now, and even as a young adult, it's just incredibly special to be part of this group of people where you share customs, you have a shared ancestral lineage and traditions. So what that means for me now, and what that meant for me as a young adult then, was that I just knew where I belonged. A strong sense of identity. It was just very clear. I belong to this tribe, and this is what it means to be part of this tribe. As a young adult, I had a really deep sense of connectedness with my fellow tribe members because we had a lot of shared experiences. I also knew that the tribe would be there for me. We have something called Harambee, which is basically a word from my native language, Swahili, that means joining together to achieve a common goal. Chantel talks about that collectivist approach that First Nations have, and we are quite similar. And how that plays out in our lives now, and how it played out in my life then as a young adult, is basically people just show up with what they have and contribute to the collective. It's about common good. And that sense of confidence as a young adult, knowing that people will be there and they will show up with what they have. Whether it's about raising money, raising kids, whatever it is, people would show up. And there was nothing too small or too big. It was about showing up in your privilege, and showing up in your lack, and in your whatever you had in your hands. That is what you contribute. And as a young adult, that gave me confidence, and it gave me confidence to know that my contribution was important, and it gave me confidence that if I needed help, there would be people that would rally around me. And it really set me up for my transition to Australia in 1990. Coming here as a student, studying psychology, knowing how the tribe operates, having that Harambee philosophy as one of the many things that influenced me, allowed me to come in and navigate this new landscape as a culturally diverse woman. It also has given me the foundation to show up as I show up right now, as a human being, as an adult, to do the work that I do as a diversity and inclusion practitioner, to deliver this amazing program with Gemma and Chantel, and showing people how to become better together by really helping them with the conversational capability. That's been the most powerful thing, and I'm so grateful to my ancestors for that the gift of the tribe and the philosophy that they have imparted in my life.
Wow. There's so many moments already that I'm like, oh, we could just stop there. That was amazing. Lillian, you said a word just then that I feel like I hear every day right now, though it's complex and complicated in the world that we're in. I feel like I'm constantly hearing this topic on diversity, and I feel like we're not quite there, and there's still some significant challenges around having respectful and open communications that are with a diverse lens. So Gemma, I'm going to throw to you with this one. With this world that we're in, we've got children around the same age by the sounds of it. What do you think to be, the common discussion points, and what do you think we need to be doing more of so we can be having better conversations around diversity and in these challenging environments?
Whew. How long do we have, Caroline?
No pressure. Can you fix it for us, please?
Yes, I think no, I can't. But I think we can start, right? So I think that you're right in the word that you used around, it's complex. But I think there are some things that certainly Lily and Chantel and I talk about through the work that we do, which are that, and I guess part of the reason that we came together with this idea of how do we become better together? How do we stop having such an individualistic focus on some of these things and start to come together, in terms of sharing, the common understanding, sharing humanity and being in community with one another. How do we do that? And, how do we become better humans to other humans, right? That's kind of what we all, I think, I assume positive intent with people. And I think most people are good people and actually do want to be good to one another. And so I think the first thing that we talk about is we need to stop shying away from conversations, just because we don't know the right answer, because quite often there is no right answer. And that there are, multiple ways to understand someone's experience, and so shying away from the conversations altogether isn't the answer. So we really need to help people understand, give them some mechanisms and some tools to lean into these conversations with empathy. And I think part of that is helping people to seek to understand, not to reply or respond, because that's what we see in the age of social media is, and don't get me wrong, I've been caught up in this. I've been sat there for hours on end, especially through lockdown, being like this keyboard warrior, like responding to people. That's not right. That's not true. Kind of going at people and attacking and attacking and attacking. And I know that some of that is through my own pain and, wanting to be a great ally or just wanting to support my community, and some of it's projecting my own experience around shutting down homophobia online. But you know what? I can't change those people's opinions by attacking them quite often. So, this idea of how do we seek to understand one another and remain in conversation for as long as possible. There's a concept we talk about in our program around the difference between being unsafe and uncomfortable. And those two concepts are really important things to know, especially as a young person, is to know when you're unsafe and to know when you're uncomfortable. Chantel does a great analogy around her jiu-jitsu and being in an arm bar, which I'll let her talk to. But, there's a difference between being unsafe and uncomfortable. And I think the other couple of things are really around this idea that Lillian talked about and Chantel around, like, how can we be here to improve community versus prove ourselves? Like, improve humanity and community should trump the idea of proving myself and proving my point every single time. So if we can go into conversations saying, I'm here to try and improve community, to improve connection, and to improve my own understanding rather than prove my point and prove myself, then I think we can get further along. And I think the final point around this concept of what's needed for diversity and inclusion is actually there's as much unlearning required as there is learning. And part of what we help people understand through the work we do is what shaped you and what are some of the assumptions and norms that you believe are universal that actually are not. They've just shaped you and they're your view of the world, and we're not here to criticize that, but what we're trying to help you understand is just because it's true for you doesn't mean it's a universal truth, and that there are other ways that people experience this world. And so unlearning some of the unhelpful norms and assumptions that we've developed over time is also part of the process. And I think there's a lot of work out there being done on how do we do new things in D&I and how do we add and how do we learn. But actually there's not much talk or enough talk on unlearning some of the things that are getting in the way of inclusion.
I think it's really interesting that you say that last point, because though our community who are our listeners are all different ages and stages and seasons of their life, there's definitely a purpose to this particular podcast to support our younger adults. But I think we underestimate how much even young adults need to unlearn, because they have mirrored and mimicked and, shadowed their parents, their guardians, their elders, their teachers, their coaches, their whoever is giving them, be it subtle or very direct influence in their life. And, I naively probably looked at the concept of what we wanted to create for this particular podcast series and thought, yeah, let's teach them some of the things. But I hadn't even thought about the fact that we probably need to be open enough so they can unlearn some of the things, and we can share